Joining me now is Maria Teresa Kumar, President and CEO of Voto Latino, and Tom Bonier, political strategist and senior advisor for Target Smart. Thank you both for being here. Tom, I do want to start with you to just go through some of the basics on the numbers. Well, we still have our exit polls, but I don't know if you have like data that you can throw on top of it. Let me just put up the big picture. Donald Trump won white voters overwhelmingly, 57-41. Black voters, nope, didn't move. Black men stayed exactly where they were before. Asian Americans still went majority Harris, 54-39. And people have been trying to say, oh, but the Native Americans went for Trump. Yeah, but they were like 1% of the electorate. It is white voters who really showed out for Donald Trump. And that, to me, is a story that is not being told in a fulsome enough way. They were 71% of the electorate, whereas they were 67% of the electorate when Donald Trump ran in 2020. Can you talk about sort of what happened, in your view, in terms of the numbers?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And like you said, it's going to take time. We have to be patient to be able to understand the entire story of what happened. It takes a while to get all the vote history, to know who voted, and we'll be doing that work. But from the data we have and what you just shared, if we want to point the finger at any group or any sector of the electorate that would be most responsible, frankly, it's people who look like me. It's Gen X white men who were the strongest group for Donald Trump and have been consistently. And yes, you see small movement in the electorate from other groups. You mentioned Latino voters. Undoubtedly, Democrats need to invest more in communicating and reaching out to these voters. But in terms of who is responsible, we're pointing the finger in the wrong direction if we're looking at voters of color.
And Maria, I wanted to have you on. Maria Teresa, we talked about this weekend. I mean, there has been a super focus on Latino men, and they did go, those who turned out did go majority Trump. But isn't the those who turned out part important? Because what we saw is that Trumpier people turned out in general. It was about 7% fewer Democrats turned out than turned out in 2020. Overall, it is just more Trumpy Latinos turned out, more Cuban Americans, more people who like Trump and listen to a lot of podcasts and right-wing radio.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the dust settles, Joy, what we're going to see is that the Republicans did an effective job of turning out their base, including investing a lot in the Latino voter. We saw this in 2022. To give you an example, in 2022 compared to 2018, in the midterm election, Latino support on the Democratic side fell 37%. There wasn't a turnout game. Whereas on the Republican side, there was. So right now we're experiencing a bit of an over-index on the Republican side. I remind folks that we have roughly 10 million people that didn't show up this time that did in 2020. And I think when the dust settles, you're going to see that there just was not the ground game. There wasn't that constellation of voters being contacted by small, independent grassroots organizations. I can tell you for a fact that we were fielding calls from local groups saying we don't have enough resources. And when they said they didn't have enough resources, Joy, I'm talking about they didn't have $18,000 here to put in calls. They didn't have $20,000 here for flyers. I mean, there was this idea that the campaign had it, and we were making the calls and saying local groups are part of this ecosystem. Why? Because when that person that knocks on your door, more than likely you're going to see them in church. You're going to run into them in the beauty salon. You're going to run into them into the, at the gas station. It's going to be harder for you to say that you're not into listening if they're talking to you about the importance of these issues. And so there really has to be a broader understanding and a broader respect for the grassroots organizer on the ground. And I also do deeply believe that there also has to be a come to Jesus moment with the Democratic Party. The concentration of decision making is not decentralized as it should be. If you want to take a message from the Republican Party, they decentralized their messages a lot. They decentralized it through podcasts you mentioned. They decentralized it through churches. They decentralized it everywhere to ensure that there was a constant ecosystem. And in this case, that wasn't what was happening. And I keep reminding folks, the people that brought the Democratic Party to the dance in 2018, in 2020, in 2022, the fact that they were grossly underfunded, that is an oversight, but it was also a gross miscalculation. I also think that we have to have a conversation around the economy, and I think that's what we're also going to see. The fact that people did swing, even among young people, was that they couldn't pay their rent, and we have to be frank about what was missed.
Right. I mean, a lot of misinformation and was believed by voters who were at lower propensity voters. But I want to come back to you, Tom, because there are a couple of myths that I feel like need to be dispensed. One of them is people are focused on the fact that in all of these swing states, and most of them, the down ballot Democrats did really well. In some cases, won, but Kamala Harris lost. What was this undervote? Can you explain why there are places where it seems that people only voted the top of the ticket?
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to address this because this has seemed to be one of the most viral takeaways from this election. And it's incredibly important that we're clear-eyed about what actually happened. And I see no evidence of fraud in these results, to be clear. The swing was fairly universal across the country, less in the battlegrounds. But to your point about these undervotes, we did see fewer ballots cast in these competitive Senate races. But it's a minimal difference. In Michigan, it was about a 1.5% drop off. In Wisconsin, it was about 0.8%. We know that Donald Trump has had this somewhat unique phenomenon where his votes aren't necessarily transferable to the Republican candidates down ballot who are trying their best to look and sound like him. We saw that in 2022. We saw that to some extent in these competitive Senate races. And then you saw Democratic Senate candidates, frankly, running very good campaigns. And there's a reflection of that where Democrats were able to succeed in these competitive battleground states.
And so you're seeing, so to bottom line it, what was the total number of votes that would have swung this election back to Vice President Harris? Because it seems that it was, people think it's millions, but isn't it like 100,000, 120, 130,000?
That's right. It's right about that neighborhood. And obviously, they're still counting votes, but it's a little bit over 100,000 votes across those close states. And when you look at the actual swing nationally, it sort of gives us a different picture of what happened. Seems that Democratic turnout was more depressed from a national perspective, where outside of the battleground, Vice President Harris, the margin dropped by almost 8 points relative to President Biden's margin. But within these battleground states, the difference was about 3.3 points, meaning it was substantially closer. And that's a margin. So we're talking about her running really about a 1.5 behind President Biden from 2020.
And I should remind everybody, California, I don't believe it's finished counting, so that's going to change what the popular vote total is. But bottom line, the Democrats didn't get out their base vote. They didn't get out their base vote. They focused on the wrong things, converting Republicans rather than getting base voters out, particularly brown and black base voters. So the brown voters that came out were more Trumpy. That's what happened. And that is those men and also young men who are much more open to misinformation pro-Trump came out.